What is the crack, everyone? It's Ollie from B2B Sports here. Breaking news, Daniel Ricciardo has left RB with immediate effect. He will be replaced with Liam Lawson for the remaining of the 2024 season. This has been such a roller coaster of a storyline for too long now, in all honesty, especially with how it was left in Singapore. It leaves a sour taste in the mouth of many F1 fans, and in particular Daniel Ricciardo fans. How it was dealt with and what he had to endure that weekend, I can't even imagine the pressure that he was under and the constant scrutiny from the media. It was a rough one. It was a rough one to watch, and that emotional interview post race, it was tough to see. It was tough to see. We all know Daniel is such a smiley, fun character in the paddock, and that just seemed like a broken man there, and it was just horrible. He's also just released an Instagram post as well. The picture is him in the VCARB uniform, we're holding his helmet from behind, and the caption is, "I've loved this sport my whole life. It's wild and wonderful and been a journey. To the teams and individuals that have played their part, thank you. To the fans who love the sport sometimes more than me, thank you. It'll always have its highs and lows. It's been fun, and truth be told, I wouldn't change it." And then he ends the caption with, "Until the next adventure," which to me sounds like he's walking away from the sport a little bit. It seems like a goodbye. It seems like a thank you and farewell. It seems like, in all honesty, he's had enough, and I wouldn't blame him, to be honest. He's been strung along the past couple of years with RB. He's made it clear that he's wanted that Red Bull seat, and one way or another he just hasn't achieved that. The constant pressure with Liam Lawson waiting in the wings in that RB, it must have just been unbearable. You have to be honest, and you have to say that he disappointed in the first half of the season. I think a lot of people expected him when he moved to RB that he would be, yuki getting the better of Yuki Tsunoda. He would be the main point scorer, the lead team driver. But Yuki has contributed more points in the VCARB. I think particularly in the early part of the season, Yuki had a great start, and Daniel sort of struggled to get to grips with the car. But the second half of the season, I would say that he's been super unfortunate. If you look at the race results and the qualifying results on paper, he's had a much better second half of the season, and primarily he's achieved better results than Yuki. I think those results lack substance though, because he hasn't been able to achieve points. Maybe that's because teams like Williams, Aston Martin, Haas have upped their game dramatically in the second half of the season, so they're flagging behind a little bit. I don't think he's necessarily had the car underneath him to gain points, which has been unfortunate, but I think it would be unfair to say he's been poor, especially into this middle to second half of the season. I suppose when you're a driver of his profile and a driver that wants to achieve and get into Red Bull, 11th, 12th, 13th ahead of your teammate, it just doesn't cut it, unfortunately. At this point in the video, make sure you whack the like button, give my channel a subscription. It really, really means the world to me. If you're interested in F1 content, NFL content, UFC content, boxing content, football content, B2B Sports is the place to be. I'd really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Daniel began F1 at Toro Rosso before moving to Red Bull, where he was able to gain 7 race wins in total at the team. His infectious personality was featured heavily in the Netflix series Drive to Survive. His aggressive overtakes, his late braking, gained him many, many fans around the world. But ultimately, his time at Red Bull began to come to an end when Max Verstappen burst onto the scene and quickly established himself as the number 1 driver at Red Bull. I think this is a crucial point in Daniel's career, because at this point he decided to leave and join Renault. What could have happened if he stayed on at Red Bull and continued to fight with Max? I have no idea. He thought he was making the right business decision for himself. He wanted to become the number 1 lead driver at a new team, and at that point Renault was offering him a lot of money and a lot of promises that was simply too attractive for him, and by doing that he's missed out on the Red Bull era of dominance, essentially. Apologies, quick dog walk later and I'm back. Ricciardo's move to Renault was nothing short of a disaster, really. The car just wasn't up to standards. It wasn't competitive enough. It wasn't the car that it was promised to him, and it came across as a massive error of judgment for his career path. He was then offered the opportunity to move to McLaren. McLaren was promised to be the next up-and-coming thing. I think that he knew and the team knew that there was still a lot of work to be done. There was a young Lando Norris at the time at the team, and this was a team that was driven to progress, to develop the car, and to eventually become a top team, which now they obviously are. He achieved his 8th race win at McLaren and a dramatic race in Monza, but that was the highest of heights at McLaren for Daniel Ricciardo, and this is where people really started to raise questions about his talents or whether or not he still had it to race at a top team. I think even Christian Horner said it. Daniel didn't look like he did at Red Bull. He lost a lot of weight, a lot of confidence as well, and again he was in another sticky scenario when they announced the Oscar Piastri signing. They paid him a lot of money, I think it was $20 odd million in the end, to essentially lose his seat. Again, it just wasn't the right fit for Daniel. The car and the driver didn't match. Once he left McLaren, he officially didn't have a seat in F1. That was it for the time being. He was out, he was loving life, exploring, travelling, whatever you want to do. And then the Red Bull move happened. He was signed as the 3rd driver behind Max and Checo. It seemed to be a marketing role of sorts. Everyone loves Danny Rick. He's a great marketer of the sport. He brings a lot of eyes onto the sport, and he seemed to be at a lot of the events in New York and so on, and just doing things around marketing. I think there was an expectation of him to be in the sim back at the factory in Milton Keynes, working on the car, tweaking the car. He particularly impressed at a track day in Silverstone, and the door of opportunity opened up for him at Red Bull, this time at AlphaTauri in the sister team, which is typically known as the junior team, but they'd given him the opportunity as a more experienced driver to try and nurture Yuki Tsunoda and try and provide important insight and information to the team for that car. Daniel's not been ashamed to say, but he was using the AlphaTauri or VCARB seat in this season's instance to try and progress him, to try and get him back into that Red Bull seat. And this is where the big debate is, really, because we all know that Checo Perez has massively struggled in that second Red Bull seat in comparison to Max. His performances have been poor. In particular, this season he's so far away from Max in the Drivers' Championship. But yet Red Bull still cling on to Checo, still cling on to hope that it will produce some good results. Last season you can argue it didn't mean so much that he was underperforming, purely because Red Bull was so far ahead in the constructors that it didn't really matter. But this season, this time around, the fact that he's not been able to match Max's race results is crucial. And I think myself and a lot of F1 fans alike are questioning why Checo Perez still has a seat in F1 and now Daniel Ricciardo doesn't. You never know, Daniel Ricciardo in that Red Bull could have exactly the same performances as Checo, but I do not understand why they're not even willing to look at another option. We know how cutthroat Red Bull usually is. Albon, Gasly, Ricciardo, we all know how Red Bull do their business. So why are they still clinging on to Checo? Is it endorsements? He brings in a lot of money to F1, being the only Mexican driver on the grid. Checo seems like he has a hold on Red Bull somehow. And I think part of me is a little bit confused why Daniel hasn't been given the opportunity to race in a Red Bull when Perez has continuously been beaten by his teammate. But from a business standpoint, I partly understand too. Daniel's results on paper haven't been good enough. I think he was expected to beat Yuki quite handily in the end, and that hasn't happened. If this were to be Daniel's last race in Singapore, I think it was handled extremely badly. For him not to be given the opportunity to say a proper goodbye is shameful, to be honest. He's given a lot to the sport. He brings a lot of eyes onto the sport. He's genuinely a really, really good guy. Yes, he's made a couple of poor career decisions for himself, but he should have been given the opportunity to say goodbye. He shouldn't have been thrown under the bus in front of the world's media. He should have known his fate. He should have been kept waiting. I think it was really, really shocking treatment, to be honest. And Daniel Ricciardo's not only a racer, he's a human being, and no one should be subjected to that. Where do we go from here? Does Daniel keep racing? I think in his Instagram post, he looks like he wants to continue to race in some aspect. From an idealistic standpoint, I'd love for him to end his career in Red Bull, give him the 2025 season and see how it goes. But I also can see him in IndyCar. He's technically Australian-American at this point, and I'm sure he'd tear that up given the option. But if this is the end, farewell Daniel Ricciardo. You've given so much to F1, and I know a lot of people are grateful for you. Let us know your thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo leaving RB. Is this the last we'll see of him in F1? And where do you think he'll go to next? But thank you for listening and watching, everyone. As always, I super appreciate it. Peace out, and on to the next one.